From the Leslie Dan Faculty of Pharmacy at the University of Toronto, this is the I'm Pharmacy podcast. And I'm Mina Tadros. We're back. Welcome to a new season of the I'm Pharmacy podcast. Did you miss us? I'm sorry we took so long. Things were happening and babies were being had. So, did we miss anything? All right, who are we kidding? How much has happened in just the last year? That's exactly where we want to pick up this season. This season, we're going to talk about catalysts for change. Those moments, those forces that shift entire systems. These catalysts can come from policy, technology, economics, or even culture. But they all share one thing. They create turning points. 2025, without a doubt, feels like a turning point. But how did we get here? And in health and pharmacy, turning points aren't just abstract ideas. They reshape patient care, research priorities, and even how societies decide what matters most. Over the coming episodes in our 5th season, we'll look at some of the biggest catalysts changing our field right now. We'll explore the global fight against misinformation, the rise of artificial intelligence, the evolving pressures around pharmaceutical pricing, and the shifting landscape of how we fund and value science itself. Each of these is not just a topic, it's a force that's rewriting the rules. We're living in a moment of transition. For decades, we've seen a relatively stable set of rules. We were super spoiled, if we can be honest. Things like who funds science, who leads innovation, who sets the global agenda. But those rules are all under strain. The way societies make decisions about science and medicine is changing faster than ever, and the consequences, especially in the future, will be profound. That's where we want to start this episode. Who funds science and how?
President Trump's sweeping federal budget cuts could literally mean the difference between life and death. The Trump administration has so far terminated more than $1 billion in grants for the National Institutes of Health. Now, the NIH is responsible for more than 80% of the world's investment in biomedical research. 80% of the world's investment. Funding from the NIH is responsible for countless...
For much of the last century, the United States has been the undisputed engine of biomedical and scientific research. Just to put it into perspective, the US invests over $200 billion annually in research and development, with about $47 billion of that coming from the National Institute of Health alone. To give that scale, the NIH budget is larger than the GDP of some countries. It's more than double the combined public health research spending of the European Union. This dominance has fueled breakthroughs from the sequencing of the human genome to the development of mRNA vaccines to developing entire drug classes for drugs that help with cancer and HIV. And with this investment came massive economic upside. The rise of Silicon Valley, countless pharma and biotech companies with new products that are shaping the way that medicine is delivered. Simply put, US funding decisions have shaped the global innovation pipeline. But here's the turning point. The US is no longer a steady or as predictable a leader in this space. Political polarization has put funding priorities into question. At the same time, other countries have struggled to keep pace. Let's really be honest of what it looks like at home. Canada, for example, invests just 1.7% of GDP into research and development, while the US invests close to double, 3.6% of their GDP. And when you look specifically at health research, the gap is even more striking. The Canadian Institute of Health Research, CHR, our largest funder, has an annual budget of $1 billion. Compare that to the NIH at $47 billion. It's not just a gap, it's an ocean of investment in science. This creates a dangerous imbalance. If the US pulls back or even just shifts its priorities inward, who steps in? Who funds the next generation of cures, the next big leap in health technology? And how do countries like Canada, with smaller budgets and fewer resources, position themselves in this new environment? And that's what we want to dive into today. How shifts in US science funding ripple outward, what it means for Canada's future as a research nation, and why this moment feels like a true catalyst for change. Because the way we fund science is not just about labs and grants, it's about treatments, innovations, and how we will live in the future. Let's get started. To start better exploring this moment, I spoke to Dr. Adam Bjorndahl, who's an associate professor in the Department of Philosophy at Carnegie Mellon University. He's also a University of Toronto alumni and expat. Dr. Bjorndahl recently penned an article in Maclean's magazine titled "It's Time for Canada's Brain Gain." He argues that this is an opportune moment for Canada to reverse the brain drain and draw some American scientists to Canada's universities. We've heard about this brain drain of many Canadians going to the US for higher paying jobs, more opportunity. But it seems like things are kind of switching, and there's been a narrative there about, can we actually reverse that during this time at all? So maybe what even triggered you to write that piece? And then tell us a little bit about it.
Fundamentally, I was angry. I was like a lot of academics. I was angry watching what was happening to universities, what Trump and his administration were sort of putting into motion, even from the very first weeks, because I wrote the first draft of this in January, at the end of January, early February, when it was just the beginning, and it was just kind of, showing what was to come, and that was borne out. So I think it came from sort of a sense of anger, but also like a perspective a little bit different from a lot of my colleagues, because I am Canadian. It was a sort of sense of like, look, fundamentally I'm Canadian, and for a long time, I sort of lamented the fact that it was hard to get, good academic positions in Canada. At least for me, I sort of am in a niche area. There aren't, there's not an overabundance of opportunities that I found. And so, getting a good position in the States is really hard to turn down, really hard to walk away from. And I love it there. I love my colleagues. Pittsburgh's a great city, but, I would also love to be back in Canada with my family and in, under a government that makes sense to me. Just seeing this happening, it was like, yeah, okay, so they have the money, but now the leadership behind it is, just bonkers, to be frank, just to the point where long-term enterprises, which require a steady hand, aren't viable anymore. You don't know whether your funding is going to last.
But for many people, they don't quite understand what's happening in the US. So just for context, like I had some NIH grants pulled with colleagues, or like halfway through the review process, just streamlined because of my name being on it as a Canadian. Maybe describe to us over the last 6 months what's been happening to the funding structure and the grants in the academic world.
Yeah, so I mean, it's complicated because it's been sort of on multiple fronts, but essentially you're looking at various government actions to either make it harder to get grants, to make it so that when you get grants, they pay for less, you get less money, but also on top of that, to make it so that even grants that you've already gotten that are set for a certain number of years, and you have to make plans, plans to hire people, plans to, host conferences and conduct experiments, whatever it may be, depending on the field. And you can't even have certainty anymore that money that you've planned for, that has been sort of guaranteed to you, that you, by the way, did a lot of work to compete for. These aren't just handouts that people go around, throwing money at people. You have to do quite a bit of work. Most people, for every maybe 10 grant applications they send out, they'll get 1 or 2. So this is a lot of work, and the payoff has been cut on every dimension now, in terms of amount, but also in terms of stability. You might not have that money that you thought you were going to have. How do you plan for that?
Yeah, I have colleagues who have basically had to let go their graduate students or find other resolutions with labs being shut down and certain grants just being completely revoked. I guess people never thought that was possible for that to happen, which is like impossible to plan things. And so in your article, you say that it's an opportunity for Canada to be bold. I was literally just asked about this the other day, and I have that excitement for you, like the same that you do, with the silver lining that there's an opportunity here to step up. But I also think Canadians have to be honest that we actually haven't, right now the narrative is that the current administration's anti-science, Canada's so pro-science, but that's not true when you look at the dollars and cents, right? When you look at the amount of money the US puts behind science, if you adjust that for per capita, it's 6-7 times more. We're not talking double, it's substantially more. The budget itself is 30 times higher or 40 times higher. So what does Canada have to actually change to be bold here? Like, is it just putting money, or what do you see in that process? Like, the NIH, from my perspective, has been the envy of the world for their ability to carry science.
Yeah, well, so this is a point that I made sort of in my article, and maybe I can make it a bit more full here, which is that, living in the States, I'm constantly inundated with these messages of like, this is like the greatest country on earth. It's the best democracy. It's the hardest workers, blah, blah, blah. It gets really tiresome, as you can imagine. But I have to say, being in the academic sphere, that like American higher education really is just top notch. Like the money they put in, the talent they can attract, the way they support the people. Again, it's not just grants, but grants are a lot of it. A lot of it is money, and just the history. This isn't something that happens, on a 5-year plan. This is a history of decades and decades of investment in this, which has made American universities and research and development the envy of the world. And that's really one of the sort of few areas where I really have to say, like, yeah, America is the best in the world at that. And that's a long-term investment. That doesn't pay off, next year for the most part. That pays off over the decades. And that's part of what I mean by being bold. It's a sort of long view where you have to put the money and the infrastructure in. You have to attract the people. You have to, build the infrastructure. You have to build the communities within academia, and also the ethos, the culture around that. And when you build that, you become a powerhouse, and it's a slow burn, but it's so powerful. And we see that today, and we see the current administration just squandering it. I wouldn't have guessed that someone would be able to destroy it so quickly.
In the face of these rapid changes, I wanted to explore what initiatives Canada's taking to respond to it. I spoke to Dr. Brad Wouters, Executive Vice President of Science and Research at UHN and a senior scientist at Princess Margaret Cancer Centre. He's also one of the leaders behind the Canada Leads program, which aims to recruit 100 early career researchers and scientists to Canada's #1 hospital, UHN. Like, what are going to be the long-term impacts of, like, the U.S. pulling back from science, for lack of a better term?
Well, sure. I mean, first of all, let's talk about what's happening south of the border. And it obviously is worrying scientists everywhere around the world. The U.S. is a very important place for science. We have collaborations. Our scientists work very closely. Science is a global activity, and it's a global sport. And anywhere in the world where science comes under attack is a challenge for progress. And this is certainly true in the US. There are a number of worrying things that we're seeing. First of all, there have been decisions made on what constitutes fundable science or not, who's doing it, what it's about, et cetera. One of the real strengths in the US is that they based funding of science to a large extent on excellence for a long time. They've been a bit of a model there too. The idea that the investigator-initiated research, fundamental research, peer review, and excellence and potential are really the drivers of what gets funded, and that's served science really well. And so we're seeing worrying trends about politicians and others stepping in to decide what's appropriate science and what isn't. And we've seen a lot of grants get cut, including grants that are associated with COVID, infectious disease research, and others. That's shutting down progress in those areas for sure. It's also hurting collaborations, though. And Canadian institutions, including here at UHN, the University of Toronto, and other Tasman hospitals, are direct recipients of U.S. federal funding, the NIH. We at UHN receive, somewhere around $10 million per year from the U.S. federal government, and all of that's at risk. Some of it has already been canceled. So much of it funds really unique research that could only be done here, or it funds collaborative research as part of networks and really exciting collaborative networks, including clinical trials and other kinds of research that Canadian institutions, U.S. institutions, foreign institutions all collaborate on. And those are being cut back. And so we're seeing three things happen. We're seeing a drop in overall support for science in the U.S. It's obviously impacting U.S. scientists the most. We're seeing a drop in collaboration across the world because of the important role the NIH played there. And then we're seeing a drop in specific and important areas of research in RNA technology, for example, that, was so important during COVID.
Yeah. So talk to us about Canada Leads. How, tell us where that idea came from and the details, like how did that launch? Like, I think it grabbed a lot of attention and it was very timely.
Yeah. Canada Leads is our program to recruit 100 early career researchers to UHN. And it got started for two reasons. It was associated, of course, with what's happening south of the border. Because of the freeze in funding and from the pullback in funding and the proposed cuts, as you know, the NIH proposed cut is on the order of 40 or 50% going forward. We'll see what happens in the budget. But what this has done is created a paralysis in the US to the extent that really all new positions are frozen across the United States. So there are very few new postdoctoral research positions open to graduating PhD students, and there are very few new faculty positions. So the thousands and thousands of positions that would normally be available every year that attract people around the world to those positions are essentially not there this year. So there's a really unique cohort of talent, global talent, available this year that don't have those receptors, those positions that they normally would in the US. And those include Canadians, they include Europeans, and they include people from the US. And so there's a real opportunity here to think about talent is always a globally competitive sport. When we recruit globally. And this year there is an incredible pool to do that. So we've launched this program to take advantage of that opportunity and to try and turn Toronto into a bit of a magnet for talent, just like great institutions in the US always have been for so long. The second reason, and these are of course related, is with what's happening in the US, Entirety of Canada is thinking through where it should be less dependent on the US, where it needs to strengthen its sovereignty, where it needs to strengthen its economic future. And we strongly believe that science and a science-based economy should be part of what Canada's thinking about for its future, to take a bigger role in developing and benefiting from a science-based economy. And so we see this as the opportunity to do what we want Canada to do, to step up and lead, to take a bigger leadership position in science globally. And the best way to do that is to do some of that yourself. You want to be a leader first. And so we launched this program really with the hope, with the anticipation that Canada is going to do the same in terms of its investment in science and its commitment to science as an asset to invest in, to bring future prosperity, better health, better wealth for Canadians. And so we'll be advocating and working strongly to help our entire community think about how to do that, where that opportunity is. The pullback in the US in doing this does open up opportunity for other countries, not just in talent recruitment, but just the investment in science in itself and in the benefit that science can have on society, and thinking through how do we create more startup companies, how do we attract more capital investment, how do we create more manufacturing opportunities, and how does Canada overall lift up its game in a knowledge-based economy.
So that press conference that got a lot of attention when you guys announced this, side by side with you were policymakers. How receptive have they been to this message about this scientific economy and investing? I think they probably feel pulled in a lot of different directions. There's threats on automotive, aluminum, every day. There's different pieces. How receptive have they been to?
Well, I think, not just the policymakers, our entire community has been really excited and engaged about this idea, Canada Leads, and the investment in research and the potential it can have. Starting with our donor community. Our donor community is really important for our overall ambitions in science and in research here. We have great support through the UHN Foundation, the Princess Margaret Cancer Foundation. But that community loved this idea. And they came to the table and they're providing support and they want to see us do more. They have a big ambition, and they always have. I think, and we think our country and our city and our province needs a bit bigger ambition too.
I'd agree.
And we're trying to, make those points. And I have to say there is a lot of reception to this.
Okay.
We haven't seen a lot of investment yet, but there is a lot of reception to it. You've seen the provincial government here put life sciences on the agenda for future economic development. We haven't had big investments there, but they're talking about it. And it's being thought of as a potential series. And you're right. There's lots of other places that we're looking for growing the economy and growing assets. We should be strengthening our resources economy. We're talking about pipelines and the other assets Canada has. But our universities and our research hospitals are also global assets. UHN is recognized as the number 3 hospital in the world. And, it's one of the only hospitals on that top 10 list that's a public hospital that anybody can come get care at. The University of Toronto is globally ranked, in the top 10 or top 15 in medical life sciences. It's in the top 5. Sick Kids is one of the best children's hospitals in the world. So these are not, these are already globally competitive organizations, and they serve as great potential receptors for that new investment and to create output from it.
Yeah.
So we're ready, but we should also invest in these strong academic organizations that we have and expect more from them in terms of their benefit to Canadians, to the economy, and to drug development, to the benefit of patients and all of those things. So that's our goal, is to increase ambition. The one criticism we've had of Canada Leads, and it sometimes comes from our science community, is do we really need more scientists in Canada? We already can't fund the scientists we have at it.
Yeah.
And it's there,
I was actually asking him if I should ask that question.
Absolutely ask that question. Everybody asks that. No one is satisfied with the funding levels.
Yeah.
Grants are ultra competitive. They're not, they're not large enough to carry out the science that we want to do. So we absolutely need more funding in Canada. But as I said earlier, our Canada Leads program is premised on the idea that we're going to do that. We're going to make that investment.
Yeah.
And if we don't grow the pie, this will be a failure long term. It's not going to, we're not going to continue to attract talent. The magnet for talent in the US was the investment they made in science.
Right.
The magnet for a talent here will be, the great minds from around the world want to come here when they think they can be successful here.
Absolutely.
And when they can make contributions to science that they want to do. And that's premised on 2 things. It's premised on access to resources, to funding, and is premised on a great scientific community.
Yeah.
And colleagues and collaboration. So actually, it's based on 3 things. The third thing is the environment that people would come to move to. And, in addition to what I said about the strong institutions, Canada is also a great country to move to.
Yeah.
And just about anyone in the world would at least make a consideration that this could be a good country to move to.
I'm part of like an early mid-career researcher support group. I'm the token Canadian, and it's a bunch of Americans. And so the last 6 months, every month we meet has been them, many of them are shutting down labs, having to let go their PhD students, like really traumatic stuff for a lab. And I jumped on a call, and usually I stay pretty quiet. And then one of them asked, I heard you guys are hiring scientists up there. What's going on? What's the deal? So I guess my question to you is like, what's the elevator pitch to get the attention if someone's listening to this and thinking about coming to Canada? I think you hit on it a little bit, but like, an early career, mid-career researcher, why would they pick up and lead?
Yeah. Well, I think, there's 2 different groups. So the early career researchers, the ones that are thinking about where I might have my career, or where's an environment I can be successful. They're looking for resources, and they're looking for colleagues, and they're looking for, a great place for their family or for them to live. And if we can provide those 3 things, they'll come here. And Toronto, has got a really large base of science and activity across the universities and across the research hospitals. The mid-career is a little bit different, or even the more senior. And, these sometimes are people who could go wherever they want. They, super talented, they could get funded, and they're really thinking about just where they can be successful. And because of what's happening, because of the pullback in science, Harvard have had all their grants pulled.
Yeah.
Those individuals are looking for other options. And some of them are Canadians, some of them are from other parts of the world, and some of them are Americans that would think about coming to Canada as another option. I can tell you, I get a phone call or an email every day from someone who's just world class and thinking about, hey, is anything going on in Toronto? Any options up there? And for the Canada Leads, for the early career researchers, we put a registry website, done a little bit of, advertising or word of mouth, not really much at all. We have over 500 people have signed up.
Wow.
Put their name on that list that they want to know more. They want to see if there's opportunities to think about.
Yeah.
And that's both postdocs, early faculty, and from great institutions, across the world, really.
Ideal situation. Where do you think things are going? Let's worry about ourselves first and talk about Toronto. Canada Leads. Where do you foresee things going?
Well, I think best case scenario is we are doubling down on the investment that we make in science in Canada. Programs like Canada Leads will bring talent here, and you'll see other institutions doing similar kinds of recruiting efforts, and that creates a bit of a flywheel or momentum, because talent attracts talent, resources attracts talent, and those individuals that are part of science, many of them will stay in science and keep contributing. Others will go on and be parts of the outputs of science.
Yeah.
They'll work in great startup companies and in great manufacturing companies and biopharmaceutical companies and biotech companies and in other technology companies. And that helps sort of set the basis for a future further economic development that we all want to see happen as a consequence of the investment that we collectively make in research.
From chatting with Dr. Wouters, there was obviously a large opportunity for Canada. But what was holding us back? Here's Dr. Bjorndahl. The connection between economy and investing in research in the US is very obvious, right? Especially in our world, like in the pharmaceutical sector, the number of US companies and the technology that comes right out of the US is largely foundationally based on NIH work, right? Like that's why they've been able to do that. And the tech sector and the technology sector, and I'm sure it crosses over lots and lots of different fields. One thing that I've always kind of been, and I'd love your opinion on, is the risk-taking attitude of Canadians versus Americans. In that sense of like, is part of this the willingness to take bigger shots? Even the grants that we fund and the way we write grants are completely different. I was just exchanging with a colleague who I sent a Canadian grant to, and she's like, you need to be more bold. And I said, I don't know if any more bold, they're going to shut down my grant. So, and there's this, it's palatable, the contrast between the two. Do you think that needs to be shifted, or is there, from your observations, have you noticed that in the work that's done and how people think about the research that they do?
That's a good question. So, I haven't written grants to Canadian institutions, so I don't have that direct sense. But I could imagine that when there's a bigger pot, then there's more appetite for some long shots. And when there's a smaller pot, you want to be a little bit safer in what you're investing in. But as far as the sort of big picture goes, in a sense, I don't think it's so much as taking a risk as taking the long view. Like, we know that this works. We know because we've seen the American experiment in research and higher education pay off like 1,000-fold. And so we know that works. It just doesn't work right away. And this is part of what's short-sighted about, many have argued that what Trump really wants, or the administration really wants, is to shift a lot of this kind of R&D stuff into the private sector. The problem is that when it's sort of in the private sector and things become more profit driven, you're explaining the value of your work to shareholders who aren't going to wait 10 years for that value to materialize for the most part. The time frames are shorter. Whereas academic work, things that lay the foundations for, revolutionizing technologies, those are longer term, and those come out of academic environments where you've got the kind of people who do stuff just for the love of that knowledge and research, and because they're supported to do that type of stuff without being beholden to the sort of, what's the payoff? What's the payoff?
To wrap up, I asked both of them the toughest question of all. What comes next? Here's Dr. Wouters. The million-dollar question. Do you think what we're going through right now is a new normal, or is this a blip in the sense of just science? We don't have to think more broadly.
I think there's a fundamental shift because of what's happened. It's not easy to turn this on and off. And, you can argue there'll be a new administration in a few years. Maybe the midterms will change the House and the Congress and, the investment will come back. But I think, the benefit that the U.S. has had from its ability to attract talent, some of that's not going to come back in an easy way.
Yeah.
It's not just funding. The U.S. has also been made a place less welcoming to foreigners. No question, less welcoming to diverse ideas of science and everything that goes along with that. And I think you'll start to see shifts in where that happens. The other places happening, of course, is in Asia and in China. China just passed the U.S. in terms of its overall publications and publications in high-ranking journals. The Nature Index now has China above the U.S. in terms of output. And they are, rocketing in terms of their investment. So it's going to be hard for the U.S. to maintain the position it's had for the last 30 years, 40 years. And that's going to mean an expectation that all countries think about that a little bit harder.
Yeah.
I think the one, silver lining in what's happening is Canada's asking itself a bunch of really important questions.
Yeah.
Where does it want to be strong in the world? What does it need to do to strengthen its sovereignty, to strengthen its independence? We saw the challenges of not having that manufacturing capacity during COVID. Masks, gowns, swabs, vaccines. And our reliance on the U.S. was high. The whole world's reliance on the U.S. And as we see that pullback in funding, there's more money being pulled out of Harvard in medical research than we invest in Canada.
That's
one institution.
Yeah.
So, we're also being reminded of what the U.S. was doing.
I asked Dr. Bjorndahl the same question.
It's not just money. Money is the main tool, but it's an attack where, like we see in other sectors now too, it undermines trust. It undermines the stability, so that even if you sort of survive the current wave, people at my university are talking like, well, we do a lot of like tech stuff and AI stuff and energy stuff, so we're kind of safe because the administration likes that, blah, blah, blah. Everyone has their risk models that they're making to protect against, to, try to guard against possible contingencies. But even if you survive this wave, it's unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen 6 months from now, 1 year from now, what's going to be the next thing that gets targeted. And when things are unpredictable, you don't make long-term investments. You don't branch out. You become conservative. And so it's not just the direct loss of money. That's a major impact, but it's also the threat of that and this sort of uncertain prospect that's going to drive people away and force the people who remain in the States into a sort of conservative mindset where they don't want to piss off the administration. They don't want to do something that's going to make them stand out from their peers. That's all dangerous now.
As we wrap up today's episode, there's no doubt the water is shifting. The US has long carried the weight of global science, but that current is less steady than ever. For Canada, this moment is both a warning and an opportunity. We can no longer afford to stand on the sidelines or assume others will keep leading the way. If we want to secure our place in the next wave of discovery and innovation, we're going to have to do more. More investment, more advocacy, and more recognition of the true value of science. But how do we sell that value? Especially when others have other concerns in other industries. The reality is, we don't have to look too far for proof. Our closest friend and ally, even though it may not feel like it right now, invested heavily in science over decades, and it paid off with jobs, breakthroughs, and global influence. The question now is, will Canada step up and prove that we really do value science? And can this moment be a true shift for a positive catalyst that'll change and be the real beginnings for Canadian investment in science and innovation? This episode of the I'm Pharmacy podcast was produced by Steve Southon, Kate Richards, and me, Mina Tadros. Musical accompaniment was from Steve Southon and Diego Martinez. This episode was edited by Steve Southon. Special thanks to Dr. Brad Wouters and Dr. Adam Bjorndahl. Just a quick reminder, make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you don't mind, leave us a 5-star review. We'll be dropping new episodes every single month, so make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Stay safe and keep asking questions. Catch you at the next episode.